So, at the last recording, we finally brought the issue of professionalism to a close. We had been examining old school sales perspectives on what professionalism means and how we ought to conduct ourselves professionally in organizing our businesses. And we wrapped up on your ability to clarify expectations and went over a few things about how you can use written proposals, summaries after conversations or in text messages, how I use invoicing to clarify expectations, contracts and other forms of documentation. And then I also went a little bit into why it's important to follow up after the event, using debriefs to gauge satisfaction to be sure that everybody is happy, and if there are any sore spots, to make sure that we remedy that, because it is by doing the post-event follow-up that we're going to be able to get testimonials and referrals, so repeat business basically. And so with that, we have come to the close of what the old school sales professional people, the Brian Tracy's of the world, the Tom Hopkins, the Grant Cardones, whoever it is that you listen to, some of the very basic things that they would expect you meet up with if you call yourself a professional. So the last two are that we clarify expectations repeatedly at all stage of the conversations that we're having with our clients, in this case with our brides and grooms, and we also have post-event follow-ups because we're aiming for testimonials, referrals, and basically repeat business. And before I continue, apologies in case I sound funny, and that's because this cold has been a rather stubborn one and I haven't been able to shake it, but I'm feeling much better anyway. So let's get on with the show. And now that we're done with professionalism, for those of you who've been listening for a bit now, you remember that this conversation that we're having has three heads, and it's professionalism, business communications, and networking. So we're going to move into the communications bit. And so we're going to move into the communications bit. And basically, I would say communication is about passing across ideas or passing across information. That's what communication is. But for those of us who've been involved in business for a while, you will agree with me that we're not just concerned with communicating per se. We're not just concerned with passing across the idea or information. We are more concerned about being effective in our communication. And effective communication is more concerned about how rich the process is, how much of the idea or how much of the information are you able to get across, and is also concerned with the amount of the quality of the feedback that we get. So did we get the understanding that we had hoped for? Did we get the recipient of the message to do the things that we wanted them to do? And so that's basically what we are concerned about when we are in business. Not just communication, not just sending across the idea or the information, but want it to be effective, to pass across tons of value, and to get the outcome that we had hoped for in the beginning. Now, in order to start looking into what makes effective communication, you are going to have to revisit the common ideas that we have about communication that we get while growing up, or at least those of us who are Nigerians anyway. So luckily for me, my old man, that's my father, was a journalist, and so it's a conversation that we had quite early about how for ordinary people, communication is a linear process. I send you a text message and that's it, I have communicated with you. But for professionals in the communication space, my father was a journalist, my mom was in public relations. She also did some advertising and some marketing earlier in her career. That's after she left the Hilton. So for people in that space, communication is not a linear process. It's more of a cyclical process. So it starts with me, and it moves through a number of channels. It gets through to you, and then there's a feedback loop, and then we take it from there. So that's, I think, the first thing that we need to disabuse our minds of, that communications is not a linear process. So it's not just me, SMS, ping, you, and then communication process over. It's cyclical. It's me SMS, ping, you read, response, and then you send a message back, or you do what it is that I wanted you to do, the agenda of the message in the first place. And then we have communications going. So communications is more of a loop. So with that in mind, it will be a good idea to look through what the individual elements are in this loop. And I'm going to use an abridged version, because if you have a look at communications textbooks, if let's say you're in mass communications or something, let's say your first degree was in mass communications, you will find that this outline that I'm going to give is rather, what will I say, simple or simplistic, or is missing a number of elements. But the reason why I'm doing that, the reason why I haven't gone to a proper academic textbook to look for all the elements and run through them, is because I'm still sticking with my working definitions and philosophy. And since these are ideas that my father taught me when I was a little boy and I was able to grasp it and remember, I figure I might as well just do the same thing pretty much. So bear in mind that if you are from a mass communications background, or if you happen to have a sibling who is currently studying mass communications, news media, or any of these things, and you have a look at their textbooks, you will find that the ideas we're about to discuss might seem too limited, or rather simple, more simple than what they have in the textbook. So, from what my father taught me, the communications process involves a source, a message, the process of encoding or sending things through a channel. There's the process of decoding when it gets to the other end. Of course, we're also thinking about the receiver. That's the person on the other end of my SMS. And remember that since I said it's a loop and it's circular, then we are expecting some feedback at the end of the process, and then the context of the communication is also important. So those are the things that we're going to be looking at in the next couple of episodes: the source, the message, encoding, the channel, decoding, receiver, the feedback, and the context. And of course, after we're done looking at all these issues, we'll have the same overarching question that we have all the time, which is, now that we have looked at these matters and we understand them, how do they relate to business in general, and how do they relate to me and you and the rest of us building our businesses profitably as wedding and event folks? So, since we have a couple of items to run through, I'm only just going to pick the first two and leave it at that, and at the next recording, we'll take it from there. So, today we're going to look at the source and the message. So, the source of the message, of course, in this case, is you, the sender, or like me, in this case, the recorder of the podcast. Now, what we are concerned with when we're looking at the source is we're more concerned with clarity of the message. You have to be very clear on the message in the first place, or else all the other steps in the process are going to get totally messed up. They're going to get botched. So if I'm not clear on the intentions of my podcast and I'm mumbling along without a clear focus, then of course I record. I encode it in a shareable format, by making this podcast. But of course, since the message was fuzzy, the reception that it's going to get on the other end when you listen to it through your earbuds are going to be fuzzy as well, because you'll be like, what's this guy saying? He's ending up parts, blah, blah, blah. And that's what leads to what happens for a lot of us who start podcasts in the first place. If we're not clear on the message, then people are like, this guy is just yanning off point, and you unsubscribe. And of course, that's not what we're aiming for. Whether you happen to be a podcaster, or you happen to be a wedding photographer or wedding planner or whatever, we want to be sure that our message is crisp and crystal clear, and that we have a clear focal point, something that we're trying to pass across that people can adequately grasp. So at the beginning of the process, when we're looking at the source, that is you recording the podcast, sending the text message, making that phone call, or composing that email, we have to be really crystal clear on what the message is. Now, the message itself, that is the information that we're giving and what it is that we intend to pass across. Now, I think it's kind of obvious how those two are related. The source, the clarity of information, and then the message that ensues. And with that in mind, I guess we can say that the old school ideas that we have about communication, about how it emanates with us. At least we're on all fours when it comes to that. So yes, you are a very important part of the process. And let me just wrap it up that way, because I think I'm getting close to the 15-minute mark, and I wouldn't want to hit that. I've been going overboard too many times the last couple of recordings, so I'll just wrap it up there. So the communications process involves the source and the message, and for these first two, criteria or modes. For these first two elements, what we're concerned about is how clear that the message is. So before we pick up the phone to send that SMS, or hit the keyboard to compose that email, or pick up the microphone to make that podcast recording, or whatever it is, let's be sure that we're crystal clear on what the message is. We have some solid intent that we're trying to pass across, and some goals that we're trying to achieve with that message. So with that, I'll wrap up our introduction on perspectives in communication. And in future episodes, hopefully, we'll be able to run through encoding the channel, decoding receiver, the feedback, and the context of the communications. And hopefully, we'll be able to get that done in not too many episodes. Okay, so let me leave it at that. And thank you guys very much for listening to the Sales for the Nigerian Wedding Industry podcast. I'm your host, Abuja-based event and wedding photographer. I'll try and take care of myself in between recording of the episodes, so that at the future recordings, you guys don't have to listen to me wheezing and sniffling through the whole process. Well, thank you very much for bearing up, and thank you for listening. I'll catch you guys at the next recording.